Would it be fair to say that this fight will probably be slow but explosive? What's good? It's Woog. We've got Deontay Wilder, 43 wins, 3 losses, and 1 draw, taking on Zhilei Zhang, 26 wins, 2 losses, and 1 draw. This fight is happening after Joseph Parker started playing one of the biggest spoilers in all of boxing. Like, you want to talk about somebody who was about to be relegated to maybe gatekeeper status. Like, if he lost this fight to Deontay Wilder a few months ago after getting stopped by Joe Joyce, Joseph Parker was well on his way to exiting the top 10 in the division for the first time in like several years. But on the day of reckoning, when this was supposed to be a Deontay Wilder beat Joseph Parker and Anthony Joshua beat Otto Wallin type of night, Joseph Parker had other plans, and he defeated Deontay Wilder via unanimous decision in December of 2023. And then only 3 months later, he beat Zhilei Zhang, who was a significant favorite. Just like Deontay Wilder was a big favorite over Joseph Parker, Zhilei Zhang was also a significant favorite over Joseph Parker, and Parker won that one via majority decision. And Zhilei Zhang's name was hot coming into that fight. People were talking about, wanting to see Zhilei Zhang versus Tyson Fury, or just against other cream of the crop fighters at heavyweight. And this was on the same night. Zhang versus Parker was on the night of AJ versus Francis Ngannou. And Zhang was coming off back-to-back knockout stoppage wins over Joe Joyce, who again had previously stopped Joseph Parker. So the carousel kind of went round and round, with Parker losing to Joyce, who lost to Zhang, who lost to Parker. You feel me? But yeah, Parker upset both Deontay Wilder and Zhilei Zhang. So here we go. We've got the Bronze Bomber at 38 years old taking on Zhilei Zhang, who's 41 years old. So Deontay Wilder, it's a little bit interesting when you discuss his career, because on one hand, he was the WBC heavyweight champion for like 5 years, but there are such glaring holes in his resume to where if you are asked the question, is Deontay Wilder a Hall of Famer? On one hand, it's not a slam dunk. It's not a slam dunk, even being WBC champ through several title defenses. I'm talking like 7, 8, something like that, title defenses. He was champion again for like just over 5 years, but it's still not a slam dunk, because when you look at other aspects, like if you ask the question, who are the best guys that Deontay Wilder beat? It's a clear answer, and that's Luis Ortiz, a very good southpaw who I think is actually relevant for this Deontay Wilder versus Zhilei Zhang fight, being that Zhilei Zhang is also a big counter-punching southpaw with some craft. You know what I mean? We're going to get to that. But Luis Ortiz is by far Deontay Wilder's best win, and he's again knocked him out twice. The second one, he was losing like all the rounds, then he scored a sudden knockout. Kind of a feast or famine type of fighter in these recent years for Deontay Wilder. He's either losing the round or he's knocking the guy out, you know what I mean? Or dropping the guy, something like that. But aside from Luis Ortiz, if you were to think, who is the best guy Deontay Wilder beat? I would have to say that it's probably prime Bermane Stiverne. That was the first guy to take Deontay Wilder the full distance, and that's where Deontay Wilder won the WBC belt. So Luis Ortiz, then prime Bermane Stiverne, because remember, they ran it back a few years later when Bermane Stiverne was clearly post-prime, and Deontay Wilder made quick work of him in that second fight. And then after Bermane Stiverne, it's probably Chris Arreola. So your top 3 wins are Luis Ortiz twice, and that is significant. Like, Luis Ortiz is somebody who I wish was able to fight some of the other key fighters of that generation in the heavyweight division. I look at Luis Ortiz as being a top 5-ish heavyweight, but he just didn't get a chance to really prove that against Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury. He did fight Andy Ruiz way down the line. I mean, he was well into his 40s by that point, but he didn't fight like Alexander Povetkin, Joseph Parker, Dillian White, the other guys that really matter, you know what I mean? But again, outside of Luis Ortiz, it's Bermane Stiverne and then Chris Arreola. So and that's one of the things that's wrong with boxing. How can you be a champion for like a half a decade and these are your title defenses? Eric Molina, Johan Duhaupas, Artur Szpilka, Chris Arreola, who was supposed to be against Alexander Povetkin. That's when Wilder was flying out to Europe to make it over to Russia to fight Povetkin. Povetkin then tested positive for PEDs. That's no fault of Deontay Wilder's, but I mean, that would have been one of those super significant wins that fill up some of those holes in your resume. That would have made the argument for Hall of Fame that much stronger if he did get to fight Povetkin, but he didn't. Instead, he fought Chris Arreola, and then Gerald Washington was the next title defense, and then the rematch against Bermane Stiverne. Then he fought Luis Ortiz. Then he had that first fight with Tyson Fury. So with those being your best wins, it's arguable that your best accomplishment might be fighting to that draw against Tyson Fury, the split draw in their first fight. That might be the biggest notch on Deontay Wilder's belt, to have fought to a draw with the Gypsy King, and then he got stopped in the second and third fight in a very historic and meaningful trilogy. But because Wilder and Fury's, both of their profiles were raised so much during that trilogy, I feel like that trilogy and the exposure that it got, and the fact that at least two of those three fights were pretty legendary fights. Like the second one was that was just an ass whooping, when they had the rematch and Tyson Fury won just about every round and just bludgeoned and stopped Deontay Wilder like in the 7th round. That was just a one-sided thrashing, right? But the other two fights were very, good, exciting, and competitive. The first one featured the 2 knockdowns of Tyson Fury. The third fight featured 2 knockdowns of Tyson Fury, and that one was a very exciting, grueling, and brutal fight, the third fight of the 3. But I feel like that trilogy gained so much exposure for both fighters to where it's elevating Deontay Wilder's case for the Hall of Fame. But again, on one hand, I don't think it's a slam dunk, but on the other hand, I don't think that it's totally out of the question. It's just weird that you could be a champ for so long fighting those guys that I mentioned. And that was largely because of promotional reasons. Like one of the guys that they were trying to build a fight, with Deontay Wilder for was like against Adam Kownacki, because that was another one of the PBC guys at the time. But yeah, Luis Ortiz was the other elite heavyweight that was fighting on PBC. So that's just how that broke down. So I think that it would really behoove Deontay Wilder, like, again, he's 38, so at any point he could retire. Like, if he were to retire today, I don't think that it would be too early. Like retire when you still have your wits about you. And we're gonna get to the, some concerning things about Deontay Wilder as well. But when Deontay Wilder, 2 fights after the trilogy fight against Tyson Fury, where, Wilder first knocked out Robert Helenius in the first round. Robert Helenius is probably like a top 5, top 6-ish win for Wilder. But then he fought Joseph Parker. And I remember doing the previews, I was saying that I thought that there was a much greater chance that Joseph Parker would upset Deontay Wilder than I thought that Otto Wallin was going to upset AJ. I didn't see Otto Wallin as having much of a good chance against Joshua, just skill for skill. I just thought AJ was better, like through and through. Yes, Otto Wallin is a southpaw. Usyk was a southpaw, but I think that it's clear Otto Wallin is no Alexander Usyk. You know what I mean? And AJ fought Usyk very competitively, especially in that second fight. But I thought that Joseph Parker and the skills that he brought to the table could be a real threat to Deontay Wilder, because unlike like Anthony Joshua, who could win rounds against Otto Wallin, or he can knock you out, Deontay Wilder pretty much has one method of earning his victory, and that's to flat out knock you out, basically. And if he wasn't going to knock out Joseph Parker, in my view, was going to be racking up rounds against Deontay Wilder. But if Wilder were to have beaten Joseph Parker, that would have been like the top 1 or 2. It would have either been Joseph Parker or Luis Ortiz as Deontay Wilder's best win. But just like it would have been super meaningful for Wilder's resume, if he were to have beaten Povetkin, it would have been very meaningful for his resume to have beaten Joseph Parker. But he lost to Joseph Parker, didn't get a chance to fight Alexander Povetkin. So here he's going to be fighting Zhilei Zhang. And if he beats Zhang, that is a strong addition to the resume, to where you can start making a more meaningful argument for Deontay Wilder beating a Hall of Famer. I think that he's on the fence as it stands. But again, if he can make a big push late in his career, I think that he might have an outside shot, especially if he could get a fight with Anthony Joshua at some point and win that fight. Big if, I know. But when I size up Deontay Wilder versus Zhilei Zhang, I want to get the mental health-ish part out of the way. It was very concerning when Deontay Wilder lost in that second fight against Tyson Fury, when he fired Mark Breland, accused Mark Breland of basically sabotaging him, spiking his water, the water that he had in the corner. He was making all kinds of claims and accusations, and it was just really troubling, and it seemed uncharacteristic for Deontay Wilder, who otherwise I have seen to be a very nice guy, straight up. He seems like a very nice dude, period. But I think that fame could do all kinds of things to people. So between that, and this might be a little bit more superficial, but earlier this year, Deontay Wilder was like on a reality show type of thing. It was called The Trader with other celebrities and stuff. Deontay Wilder ended up removing himself from the show and got emotional. He was crying. It was one where you've got to like call out the traitor, and then the traitor ends up. It's just weird that with Deontay Wilder's paranoia after the second fight with Fury, that the traitor would be the type of show that Deontay Wilder's on. So Deontay Wilder mistakenly accused somebody else on the show, Max, of being the traitor. I think it turned out that Max wasn't the traitor or something, but Deontay Wilder was triggered by that whole type of gameplay and that type of show, to where he broke down in tears, removed himself from the show, and he just said that it called back to a lot of his childhood trauma. So it's just interesting that Deontay Wilder, who also attributed his lack of performance against Joseph Parker to his experiences with ayahuasca, the hallucinogenic with the DMT as the active ingredient. Well, one of a couple active ingredients. They have the chacruna root as well. Another story for another day. But Deontay Wilder and how he's changed his mindset through those ayahuasca retreats, said that he just doesn't have the violence in his heart anymore. So if you didn't have that for the Joseph Parker fight, how is that going to change for this Zhilei Zhang fight? So does Deontay Wilder really even still want to fight? Because if you don't want to fight, Zhilei Zhang isn't the guy to hop in the ring with, because Zhilei Zhang, as it stands, has a lot to prove. I mean, remember when he first was working up the ranks, and then he had that draw against Jerry Forrest where he was, I think, medically dehydrated and was hospitalized after that fight. He dropped Jerry Forrest, he being Zhang, dropped Jerry Forrest like 3 times in 3 rounds or something like that. Jerry Forrest had to rally back in a 10-rounder and make up that big gap on the scorecards. He ended up fighting back to a majority draw. So then a lot of people were like very unsure and unimpressed with Zhilei Zhang by that point. So then he goes in and wins the next 2 against much lesser fighters, both by early knockout. Then he fights Filip Hrgović on that Usyk versus Joshua 2 undercard. And this was a fight that a lot of people thought that Zhilei Zhang should have won. Filip Hrgović won the unanimous decision. When I was watching the fight, thought that Zhilei Zhang edged it. He dropped Hrgović in the first round with a nice, quick right hand hook, because Zhilei Zhang is a southpaw, caught Hrgović coming in with a sneaky right hook, even though his straight left, Zhang's straight left, is kind of his calling card. He's truly a two-fisted fighter. But yeah, Hrgović was the busier of the 2 fighters. Zhilei Zhang, as he does in many of his fights, looked very exhausted by the end of this pretty rough and just grueling 12-rounder against Hrgović. But again, this fight could have really gone either way. Hrgović was doing more of the boxing. Zhilei Zhang was doing a lot of boxing as well. I mean, he's a technical fighter. He again is not as feast or famine as Deontay Wilder is, but Hrgović had a lot more volume than Zhilei Zhang, and volume we're going to get to as it pertains to Wilder versus Zhang as well. But Hrgović earned the decision against Zhang, but this fight did a lot to build Zhilei Zhang's stock and his reputation. He benefited from this kind of controversial decision loss. And then in the next 2 fights against Joe Joyce, who had a lot of momentum going into that first fight with Zhilei Zhang, like Joyce was a significant favorite against Zhilei Zhang in their first fight. And that's because, again, Joe Joyce finished Joseph Parker and he was just steamrolling guys. The Juggernaut just seemed to have this indestructible chin. Well, Zhang versus Joyce 1 ended up being a 6-round stoppage for Zhang as he started to fatten up Joe Joyce's eye, shutting his eye, so they called that fight off. TKO victory. The second fight, he knocked Joe Joyce out badly in the 3rd round, not with the straight left as he was peppering Joe Joyce in the first fight with the left hand. It was the right hand hook that dropped Joe Joyce face first in that rematch. Zhilei Zhang by that point is looking tremendously scary. And then he has the fight with Joseph Parker where, again, Parker just outfoxed him in the same way that he outfoxed and outboxed Deontay Wilder. Joseph Parker getting in and out of range, a lot of movement, a lot of technical boxing, changing levels, working the body and going up top as well, being very elusive. Joseph Parker did his thing against both guys, but Zhilei Zhang dropped Parker twice in that fight. This was supposed to be a fight that Zhilei Zhang was supposed to win. It was supposed to be one of those, okay, Joseph Parker, congratulations upsetting Deontay Wilder, but you're about to meet your match against Big Bang Zhilei Zhang. But again, Parker pulled it off. Majority decision win. Zhilei Zhang was just not high volume enough. He just wasn't throwing enough punches minute over minute, round by round. So Joseph Parker, when he wasn't getting dropped, was winning the vast majority of the rounds. So that was a very disappointing performance for Zhilei Zhang, who it started to build a lot of questions because he is 40 plus years old. So it's like, okay, well, how much does Zhilei Zhang have left? And can we expect him to do any better than he did here against Parker? But with Wilder versus Zhang, I'm thinking Zhilei Zhang has more ways to win this fight than Deontay Wilder has. You know what I mean? But Zhilei Zhang is also low volume like Wilder is low volume. The difference is Zhilei Zhang will at least like throw left hands to the body, will jab up top, jab to the body. He'll keep the lead hand out, change levels, look for opportunities to get in on you and throw something devastating. So he's constantly trying to set you up. Even if he's not throwing a ton of punches, he's putting a different type of pressure. Deontay Wilder is more here. His hands are kind of here. He's taking a step back, looking to measure you and to dial up just one punch, that straight right hand. Sometimes he can shorten it a little bit, but it's basically that right hand, which is interesting because around the time of Bermane-Stiverne versus Wilder 1, I thought that I saw Wilder doing some pretty good boxing. I thought that he was starting to round out his skill set, but it seems like beyond that point, it was almost a state of arrested development with Deontay Wilder's skill building. He seemed to become more and more reliant on that right hand bomb fight after fight, where it's, again, you're either losing the round or you're knocking the guy out. And granted, Deontay Wilder had to dig deep to win that first fight against Luis Ortiz. I mean, he had to dig deep in the second one as well to win that by knockout. But in the first one, he got hurt in the middle rounds pretty badly. And this was after hurting Luis Ortiz earlier in that fight. Deontay Wilder then rallied again to stop Luis Ortiz like in the 10th round. That was actually an excellent fight if you get a chance to rewatch Wilder versus Luis Ortiz 1. But Wilder, again, he is so reluctant to just throw punches in the interim. He's not doing a whole lot to control rounds with the jab. He's just waiting for you to approach him without a lot of head movement, and then he'll pop you. But Joseph Parker was always coming in at an angle. He was jabbing high and then kind of keeping his head just off the line a little bit, doing a lot of little technical things, a little subtle movement here, a little nuance there, enough to keep Wilder with that right hand more or less in the holster. You know what I mean? Very good fight for Joseph Parker. But with Wilder and Zhang, Zhang does these different things, again, with the probing lead right hand. And this is, again, southpaw versus orthodox. So how do you beat a southpaw? Often with a straight right hand. How do you beat the orthodox? If you got a nice straight left, that's where you would go in several cases. But Deontay Wilder isn't a come forward continuously, keep your head and chin out there type of guy in the way that Joe Joyce is. Joe Joyce was inevitably going to keep on trying to walk Zhilei Zhang down. That's just the one speed and the one method that Joe Joyce knows how to fight with. Deontay Wilder, you know, being as tall as he is, but also kind of being a, you know, a counter puncher, somebody who's taking a step back, and he's a little bit tough to hit. He's not just going to be there like Joe Joyce. On the other hand, Zhilei Zhang, he doesn't move his head a ton. He's no Joseph Parker when it comes to the head movement. So I think that the relevant fights to kind of gauge how these guys might do against the other For Wilder, it's again Luis Ortiz, the crafty, hard-hitting southpaw who gave Wilder problems in the first and in the second fight. I think that that's a pretty decent comparison. They do have their differences, Luis Ortiz and Zhilei Zhang, but they have a few similarities as well. And then for Zhilei Zhang, I would say that it's Filip Hrgović, even though Filip Hrgović is a lot more voluminous. He throws a lot more punches. He does a lot more moment by moment boxing. He's going to win the round very often. So that one is a much looser comparison, but its comparison pretty much begins and ends with both of them being pretty hard hitting right-handers who are very tall. Hrgović is about 6'7"-ish. Wilder is about 6'7"-ish. But again, Hrgović does a lot of things that Wilder doesn't do, but if Wilder hits Zhang with some of the same right hands that Hrgović hit Zhilei Zhang with, Zhilei Zhang might go night-night. So there is that to consider. And again, Zhilei Zhang doesn't move his head a ton. So he's there, but again, he's dangerous and he's looking for you to slip up and to fall asleep a little bit so he could drill you with the left hand or again, with that right hook, which, oh man, they're equally nasty. But I'm really thinking that it might be the assumption, being that both of these guys are such devastating punchers, that this fight is going to end in a knockout. But I'm like, wait a second, but both of these guys are counter punchers and both of these guys are pretty low volume. This could be a little bit of a awkward snooze fest. Like they could both be waiting for the other guy to make a mistake. Again, I see Zhilei Zhang as trying to do a little bit more to pick the lock, so to speak, to probe, jab to the body, and to kind of outpoint Deontay Wilder in the slow moments. But I don't think it's gonna be a super combustible fight that sustains that combustibility over time. It's gonna be a big bang here and there, and then a lot of dead space, just like in outer space. If, you know, speaking of the Big Bang, there's gonna be a whole lot of nothing for much of this fight, I believe. But if I gotta pick a winner, you know, I was thinking this might be that last hurrah for Deontay Wilder where he pulls it off and knocks out Zhilei Zhang. And it's really a possibility. He can do it. Again, I still don't know how much of an appetite for destruction, shout out to Guns N' Roses, that Deontay Wilder has. And I don't know how much volume and work Zhilei Zhang can put in at 41 years old, especially again, given the super low volume that we saw him delivering against Joseph Parker, a guy who every time he cleanly hit Parker, he hurt Parker. You would think that you would want to let your hands go a bit more. Is Zhang going to be reluctant against, you know, not as head movement-y, but a pretty elusive, defensive-minded, and take a step back, patient counter-puncher Deontay Wilder? Is Zhilei Zhang going to be reluctant? I think that Zhilei Zhang is going to be picking the lock. I think Deontay Wilder is going to be looking for his opportunities. I think Zhilei Zhang is going to find Wilder with some left hands, maybe even some right hooks. I could see Deontay Wilder being the first of these two guys to get rocked. I could also see Zhilei Zhang rocking Wilder and then coming in to kind of go for the kill and then getting blasted by Wilder's right hand. So I could see him hurting Wilder and then getting dropped, maybe even stopped by Wilder. I wouldn't be surprised if this fight features a knockdown. But I think that this fight is actually going to go the distance. And because of that, and I'm saying it's going to go the distance because I think Zhilei Zhang is very durable. I mean, he's, again, not super high volume, but he did go that hard 12 rounds with Filip Hrgović a couple years ago. He did destroy Joe Joyce twice without hitting the canvas once. So I think Zhilei Zhang has a good chin. I also think Deontay Wilder is very durable. Yes, he did get stopped twice by Fury, but Fury was so relentless in how he started to apply the pressure and come forward. I would be surprised if Zhilei Zhang fights Deontay Wilder like Fury fought Wilder especially in the third fight. I thought that, you know, Fury was a lot more skillful in the second fight than he was in the third fight. I thought he was way more just rugged with the absence of some of the outside boxing that he did in that second fight. I thought he was just more physical in that third fight. That was a brutal, grueling, rugged type of fight. I would be surprised if Zhilei Zhang puts that type of pressure on Deontay Wilder. Zhilei Zhang is a boxer by trade, and his instinct is to box, not to come inside, clinch you, and start to wrestle you. So I think that he's going to be trying to box Wilder at range like he knows how to do. And I think that Wilder is pretty good at recuperating. Even when he gets hurt, he usually isn't just down and therefore down and out. I mean, he might be down and in trouble and then have to kind of buy some time to recuperate, but I do think that he is pretty durable. And if Wilder senses that he doesn't want to bang with Zhang, then I think that he's gonna fight that very reclusive, not only elusive, but reclusive type of fight where he's just doing a lot of backing up and just kind of single shot opportunity type of punching where it doesn't give Zhang a ton of opportunities to hurt Wilder, and then Wilder could therefore lose a decision to Zhilei Zhang. I'm gonna go with Zhilei Zhang. Zhilei Zhang can also stop Wilder, don't get me wrong. I mean, that's very possible, especially at this stage of Deontay Wilder's career. Like, it's very possible that Wilder doesn't have the same chin that he had just 3 to 4 years ago. That's all very possible. But I think that Wilder's gonna do enough to get through the fight. I just don't think he's gonna do enough to win enough rounds against Zhilei Zhang. And although it's possible that Wilder knocks Zhang out, I think that it's more likely that Zhang is gonna eat up the rounds and Wilder's gonna be durable enough to survive, and that Zhang will be durable enough to withstand the few punches that Wilder is able to land. So I'm actually gonna go with Zhilei Zhang via unanimous decision over the Bronze Bomber Deontay Wilder. But if Wilder did pull off the knockout over Zhang, that would be pretty spectacular, and that would really sweeten up the potential for Wilder versus Anthony Joshua, wouldn't? Like, I know that, you know, the public is very sour on Wilder, you know, after losing 2 out of 3 to Fury, after losing that last fight to Joseph Parker. But make no mistake, if Wilder can knock out Zhilei Zhang, he is right back in the mix, at least in line for a mega fight against Anthony Joshua, assuming that the belts are going to be tied up still between Usyk and maybe a rematch with Fury, or, you know, with Filip Ergovic and Daniel Dubois, maybe fighting for the IBF belt, maybe not, but the winner of that being definitely next in line to fight for a vacant IBF title, something like that. But yeah, Wilder, if he could pull this off, right back in the mix. Same thing with Zhang. If Zhang could beat Wilder, especially if it's like a stoppage or something that's very demonstrative, Zhilei Zhang is right back in the mix for a big fight. By the way, I want to see Joseph Parker get something big next. Maybe Joseph Parker fighting the winner of Filip Ergovic versus Daniel Dubois for the vacant IBF belt. I think that would be pretty fair. By the way, this fight, Wilder versus Zhang, is the headliner on this card because it was supposed to be Artur Beterbiev versus Dmitry Bivol, but Beterbiev got hurt, so they're postponing that one. But Bivol pretty much has a stay busy fight further down on the card, but this fight was then elevated to the main event. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on Deontay Wilder versus Zhilei Zhang. Who do you see winning this one, and how? And how do you think the belts should or should not be splintered? What should happen with Joseph Parker next? What should happen with the winner of Wilder versus Zhang? What should happen with the winner of Filip Ergovic versus Daniel Dubois? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.